The story of Steven and Katie Pladl is one of the most disturbing and devastating criminal tragedies of the last decade. An unsettling collision between trauma, obsession, forbidden love, and the catastrophic consequences of a relationship that never should have existed. What unfolded between 2016 and 2018 shocked the nation, not simply because of the lawlessness of their actions, but because of the profound psychological darkness behind them. This is the full story of how an estranged father, deeply damaged long before the world ever heard his name, found his biological daughter after 18 long years, married her, had a child with her, as if that wasn't enough. He killed her and their newborn baby. As a matter of fact, he ultimately ended 4 lives in the process. Please subscribe to my channel and comment your thoughts about this story as we unraveled this mysterious story together. Thank you. Stephen Walter Pladl had never been the picture of stability. Born in 1975, he grew up navigating an adolescence marked by isolation, volatile emotions, and a temper that simmered beneath the surface. He had always been different, withdrawn, unpredictable, and deeply insecure. In his early 20s, he dated and eventually married a woman named Alyssa, a relationship already fraught with red flags before it truly began. He struggled with anger and control, and Alyssa quickly found herself trapped in a marriage defined more by fear than affection. When Alyssa became pregnant with their first child, she hoped fatherhood might anchor Stephen for a positive change, or might give him reason to be better. But once Katie was born in 1998, the weight of Stephen's unresolved trauma became impossible to ignore. The infant cried. Stephen grew frustrated. He gets so frustrated about the cry of his own baby. His temper flared into an unpredictable storms. At times he was rough, at times verbally explosive, fearing for their daughter's safety. Alyssa made a choice that broke her heart but saved her child's life. She placed baby Katie for adoption in 1998 when the girl was just 8 months old. The child was adopted by a loving family in Dutchess County, New York. She grew up creative, quiet, artistic, and independent. She had a gift for drawing and dreamed of becoming a graphic designer. Whatever storms existed in Stephen's life, they never touched her childhood. For 18 years, she lived a normal, peaceful life, until curiosity compelled her to find her biological parents. In 2016, at age 18, Katie reached out to Stephen and Alyssa through social media. Alyssa was cautious but hopeful. Stephen, on the other hand, reacted with an intensity that startled even those closest to him. He became consumed with the idea of seeing the daughter he had lost. He studied her pictures, her posts, her art. He described her to Alyssa as beautiful, so beautiful, with an admiration that didn't feel paternal. When Katie arrived in Henrico, Virginia, where Stephen and Alyssa now lived, the reunion began warmly enough. There were dinners, conversations, long hours of catching up. But the family dynamic quickly shifted. Stephen became fixated on Katie, her smile, her voice, her habits. He followed her with his eyes, studied her drawings for hours. He hovered over her, obsessed. Alyssa felt something was wrong but could not identify it. After all, Stephen had always been volatile, but this was something different, something possessive or obsessive. Within 2 months, the atmosphere in the house turned intolerable. Stephen's attachment to Katie became so intense that Alyssa could barely speak with her daughter without Stephen watching, glaring, hovering. The closeness was practically beyond father and daughter level of closeness. Arguments erupted daily. Finally, in November 2016, Alyssa packed up her belongings, took her younger daughters, and left the house, leaving behind her marriage, but unwittingly also leaving behind the last barrier between Stephen and Katie. 2 months later, in January 2017, she discovered the unthinkable. Her 11-year-old daughter had left a journal behind. In it, the child wrote that her father was sleeping with Katie. Alyssa froze as she read the words. Her heartbeat thundered. She reread it 10 times. She had always sensed Stephen was capable of many things. But this? Incest? She immediately called the police. But by then, Stephen and Katie were long gone. When Alyssa left in 2016, Stephen and Katie drifted into a relationship that defied reason, legality, and morality. Stephen convinced himself and convinced Katie that this was destiny, that they were soulmates, that biology didn't matter. He isolated her emotionally, rearranged her identity, crafted an echo chamber where only his voice mattered. In July 2017, when Katie was 19 and Steven was 42, they traveled to New York, her home state, and registered their marriage in Westchester County. They hid the truth on the paperwork. They held a small ceremony with a few friends who had no idea the relationship was incestuous. They even moved into a two-story house in Knightdale, North Carolina, attempting to start a quiet, newlywed life. Katie became pregnant almost immediately. Steven was elated. Katie was overwhelmed, quiet, unsure. Their son, Bennett, was born in September 2017. But the law had not forgotten the report Alyssa made the year before. Virginia authorities had been investigating quietly. When they learned Katie and Steven had married and had conceived a child, they acted swiftly. On January 27, 2018, Steven and Katie were arrested and charged with incest, adultery, and contributing to the delinquency of a minor. The fairy tale Steven constructed was collapsing. Katie, now a mother of a newborn, spent 2018 wrestling with the consequences of her decisions. She was released on bond and moved back to New York to live with her adoptive parents. Away from Steven's influence, her thoughts cleared. She started to understand the psychological manipulation, the grooming, the emotional entrapment. She experienced a grief so profound that she often couldn't speak without crying. She missed her son terribly but feared Steven's escalating volatility. Steven, on the other hand, spiraled. He lived alone in the Knightdale house, empty crib in the corner, walls closing in. His journal entries grew darker. His phone calls to Katie were increasingly desperate. When she cut contact with him in early April 2018, something inside him snapped. On April 11, 2018, everything unraveled. Katie and her adoptive father, Anthony Fusco, prepared to take Katie to her counseling appointment. She had made a hard decision just days earlier to break off the relationship with Steven permanently and seek custody arrangements for her son that did not include him. They both stepped into Anthony's Honda sedan and began the drive. They never made it far. Steven had driven from North Carolina to New York the night before without telling a soul. He waited outside Katie's adoptive parents' home. As soon as Anthony's car began pulling out of the driveway, Steven followed. At approximately 8:40 a.m., Steven pulled his minivan alongside them at a stop sign. Shots Anthony at a close range. Anthony Fusco died instantly. Katie was shot multiple times at close range too. Steven sped away. Midday, Knightdale, North Carolina. Hours later, Steven pulled into a quiet neighborhood in Knightdale. He parked the van outside his family's home. Then he climbed into the driver's seat with a handgun. He made no phone calls, left no notes. At 1 p.m., he pulled the trigger, shoots himself. 30 minutes later, police found him slumped in the car seat. 4 lives ended that day. Katie, just 20 years old. Her adoptive father, Anthony, 56 Steven, 43 baby Bennett, discovered lifeless inside Steven's home. An innocent child destroyed without explanation. The news horrified the nation. Incest, manipulation, murder-suicide. Every element seemed too nightmarish to be real. But the pain was real, the trauma was real, and the devastation left behind would echo for years. Alyssa was left with unbearable grief, a reminder of how a broken man had shattered every life he touched. Katie's adoptive parents lost a daughter they raised and loved. Entire communities in New York and North Carolina mourned. Even investigators struggled to speak about the case without trembling. This was a tragedy born of secrecy, trauma, obsession, and a power imbalance so extreme that by the time Katie saw the truth, Steven had already sealed her fate. The story of Steven and Katie Pladl became a chilling lesson on the psychological dangers of reunification between biological parents and long-lost children, the phenomenon known as GSA, genetic sexual attraction, the devastating consequences of undiagnosed mental illness and abusive control, the vulnerability of young adults searching for identity and belonging, the high risk for violence in relationships rooted in grooming and coercion. Today, their case is examined in criminology classes, mental health discussions, and legal debates across the United States. The story stands as a reminder that love without boundaries Love manipulated, twisted, reshaped through trauma, can mutate into something deadly. When neighbors in Nightdale pass the old Pladl house, they rarely speak of what happened inside. Some refuse to look at it. Others whisper about the tragedy that claimed 4 innocent lives. The house has changed owners twice. The crib is gone. The walls have been painted, but scars remain. And in New York, a small bench sits in a quiet park in memory of Katie and Anthony. People leave flowers, drawings, and handwritten notes. Some from strangers, some from friends, all from those who refuse to let their memory fade. Katie wanted to be an artist. She wanted to draw comics, design illustrations, and someday work in animation. She had a gentle voice and a shy smile. She was not a villain. She was not a monster. She was a young woman caught in the web of a deeply broken man who was supposed to protect her, but rather he chose to be her predator instead. Her story should have been one of reunion, healing, and new beginnings. Instead, it became a tragedy that will haunt American history forever. Thank you for watching this far, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel, like, and comment your thoughts about this story. Thank you once again, and see you on my next video.